your life is really important. Your life is more important than your job. Your life is more important than your professional identity. It's more than your job. A lot of us have wrapped into our jobs our professional identity. I would question if they've actually given it a try to see what happens. But when you do try and it doesn't work, if you have truly tried and it's not working, then it's time to question, is this the time for a change?
Welcome to the Friends with Benefits podcast, an Arcadia production. This is the show all about how to grow in business, lead with purpose, and live with intention. We're your co-hosting couple. I'm Jason.
And I'm Sam. Welcome to the show, friends.
Hey.
Hey, what's happening?
We're in person again.
I know. It's much better here in person.
Much better.
The walls are kind of dark, makes it feel kind of weird, but I like seeing you across from me, not down in the kitchen.
Through a Zoom screen, even though we're 2 floors apart. Today's episode was fun, I thought.
Yeah, I thought it was great. I didn't know Casey. We were connected on LinkedIn, and that was about it.
Yeah.
So it was a really good conversation.
As the world goes. Casey is a phenomenal human. I met her through LinkedIn also, but I reached out because she started posting some pretty vulnerable content that I resonated with, and I know a lot of other people did too.
Yeah.
So,
and she comes from a world that you're very well versed in, Salesforce.
Yeah, she spent a lot of time at Salesforce, but even further as a sales manager, a people leader. I think that we can all relate to.
I really appreciated the take around like how she's trying to connect performance to well-being, and that's a lot of what we talk about with like Arcadia and the stuff we're doing, how to find harmony and bring your whole self into the work that you do. It really seems like she's very well aligned to the stuff we're talking about.
Totally. I had some light bulb moments during this episode too. Okay, so Casey Calkins is today's guest. She spent a lot of her career as a senior sales leader and found herself in a really not great situation health-wise because, as she put it, the addiction to chronic stress got the best of her.
Yeah, that story's crazy.
Yeah. So now she has taken a step back, is reclaiming kind of what success looks like to her, but is also helping leaders and companies, as you said, kind of define how to be a great leader while not putting your literal life on the line. Yeah. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Thanks for being here.
See y'all.
Casey, thank you so much for joining the show today.
Yeah. Hello. Good to meet you.
Hello. Good to meet you too.
Didn't even get the informals out of the way before we jumped right in.
No, we're just going to jump right in because, as always, we have a lot to cover. So, Casey, I don't even really remember how we met, but I'm thinking it was through LinkedIn. Maybe I read one of your posts, vice versa. And then I think we just exchanged DMs and then had a few conversations, if that sounds right to you.
I feel, Sam, like perhaps I had gotten brave enough a few months back to put out a very personal post about my health. And I feel like you might have reached out to me after I posted that.
I think that tracks, yeah.
It like went kind of viral, which was really scary. And viral for me. Like, listen, I'm by no means an influencer.
No, I think it did. I think on LinkedIn it did. Let's just start there. Do you care? Would you mind giving us a run through of that story? Because I think the reason it went viral is because so many people resonated with it.
Yeah, it's really funny in the aftermath of it too. So I spoke about the catalyst for me leaving my career in corporate and pursuing something on my own. And I say catalyst, but it wasn't really an instantaneous catalyst. I always worked in corporate America, high tech for several years, big tech in roles of sales leadership, which, if anybody who's been in that world knows, it's extremely high energy, fast paced, constant, high demand.
And also when she says this, we're talking like VP of Salesforce. So
yeah,
this is large roles.
Definitely high demand.
We were managing a pretty big book of business. And I say that I think I constantly undervalue my time when I was there because it's such a big, huge organization. But yeah, it definitely was a demanding role. And COVID rocked my world as a working mother. And I think there are certain personalities that fall into those roles that become their own kryptonite. in the sense that I succumbed to my own kind of chronic stress addiction, if you will. I don't like the word burnout. I think it's a little bit overused, but I do think that there is a real distinguished dopamine hit that comes with that constant stress loop. And it took a real toll on my health. I started dealing with really bad chronic migraines, and I had one episode in my late 20s, and then I had it again in 2021, which it turned out to be a cerebellar stroke at the age of 36. Wow.
Goodness.
Yeah, it was like kind of am I allowed to curse on this podcast?
Yeah.
It was a holy shit moment, right? And at first they didn't know what it was because I was so young. They questioned if it was actually that. But I went through a slew of tests to find out that I did have certain physiological factors that contributed to this environment of being more prone to stroke. However, the doctors were like, you're living in an unsustainable lifestyle right now, and you need to check yourself. So I took some time off. I got my health under control, and I actually went back. And I was feeling like I've got this renewed sense of energy. And it wasn't until about 2 years later that I had this realization of I'm going down this path again. I'm constantly having migraines again. And I really just had this eye-opening experience of life is quite literally too short for me to do this. And if I don't try to do something on my own terms, I think that was a big thing for me, was doing it on my terms, not on other people's terms. I'll regret it for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Love that. It's very interesting that you mentioned the chronic stress that led to the, we'll call it burnout for lack of a better term.
Yeah.
But I was just reading about that this morning in a book called Excellence by Brad Stolberg, big fan. And he was talking about, stress can be a good thing, right? But stress plus rest equals, recovery and growth. But when you're constantly living in that and you're not able to recover, not able to rest, not able to, bring yourself back from it, that's when it gets bad. That's when, people experience burnout. Apparently people experience strokes.
And other health issues, right? It's the looming undercurrent for everybody. And you look at everything from diabetes to cancer to heart disease, not even mentioning depression, anxiety, and all the other mental health issues. The underlying comorbidity is stress. And we all seem to just slough it off as nothing, as just normal life. And frankly, we live in a culture that really leans into it and embraces it.
Almost rewards it, yeah.
Rewards it. And by the way, even compared to when I first got into the workforce 20 years ago, I didn't have a laptop with my first corporate job. I didn't have a cell phone. I had a desk phone, and I had a desktop top computer.
And an abacus.
And an abacus. That's right. Yeah. Back in my day. But there is something to be said for the natural boundaries that were created with that, right? And it's kind of gone now. It's really tempting to always have this thing in your hand. Just one more thing.
It's gone. And I think the expectations of it staying at work are also gone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you find that was like part of like that chronic stress, is like the ability to always have it right in front of you?
Yeah. Gosh, it's really tempting. And it's also very hard. I started setting really clear boundaries for myself in my work, but it gets really hard, and it's real how difficult it is when you feel like you're always the one trying to set the tone for boundaries, trying to set the tone for emotional regulation and managing your own cortisol levels. It's hard when you're the one that logs off at 6 p.m. and doesn't log back on at 10. And then you wake up the next morning and you missed all of your colleagues slacking back and forth, if you will, or on Teams back and forth until 1 a.m. That's hard.
Talk to me more about that feeling of needing like you have to set the tone. So like you felt that as a leader, you were in a VP role, correct? So you felt like you had to set the tone, like the pace, like everything the team did. You felt like rises and falls on you. Like tell us more about what that felt like.
I think leaders frequently underestimate how much they set the tone for the team. I was constantly that leader of super accommodating to everyone on my team. I encouraged PTO. I granted PTO. I granted flexibility. However, I would take calls from the sidelines at my kids' baseball games. I would be responding to emails, not all the time, but late at night. And I think I underestimated how much those actions actually spoke louder than the words that I was saying to the team. I have a lot of leaders that come to me wanting me to come and talk to their teams about stress management, self-regulation, burnout, boundaries in work and home life, wellness and balance. But it's really, really difficult to look in the mirror and acknowledge as the executive of this team that maybe the linchpin of this is actually you, not what you're telling your team to do, but how you're actually handling yourself and what you're modeling for others.
Yeah, I think tone versus example, right?
Yes.
I agree completely. And I think that there's so much to unpeel there. You even have written about this, but as a manager, it feels like the default is to do everybody's job, to be constantly available, to, in today's society, we've alluded to this, but like wearing this badge of exhaustion, of stress, is almost a badge of honor. And so how do you, just by leading by example, how do you still feel accomplished and in control while giving your team the right example? Does that question, like without burning yourself out and making sure that everything's done, how do you create, I guess that's a culture question. How do you create a culture where everybody shows up?
I used to tell my team at the beginning of every new fiscal year that my goal was to empower them to be the most effective self-managing individuals possible on the team. And that meant holding them accountable to expectations that we have for the job, but also giving them the space to reach those goals in the way that is best for them. I don't expect people to do things the way that I do them. I don't know if I'm answering your question, Sam.
No, I think you are. And I think it's exactly that. So do you feel that you were able to help your team accomplish that goal through your actions? Like, were they watching you as a leader and being like, oh, I have to do it that way? Or were you giving them the space to figure it out on their own?
I think it evolved over time. So I think in my first couple of years of leadership, it was a lot of overfunctioning, doing instead of leading people to do things because I was afraid of it getting messed up. I felt like I had to prove myself. And also there is an element of it's just faster if I do it, right? But the longer I was in it, you get more clarity on when you think of balls in the air, which balls are made of glass, that if they fall, they're going to shatter, and which balls are made of rubber, that if they fall, it's annoying, but they're not going to break. They're going to bounce. And I, as a leader, really made it my job to help my team understand what balls are made out of glass and what balls are made out of rubber. And I will step in on those things that are made out of glass as needed. If it's looking like it's going to drop, I'm going to step in and help you ensure that it doesn't drop. But those things that are made out of rubber, I would even tell them, I'm going to let you try to handle those on your own because I know that if you mess up and you fail, it's going to be okay. And that sometimes meant, this may seem like very taboo to say as a sales leader, that sometimes meant letting them mess up and actually lose deals for our team, right? And if it was not a thing that was going to be the end of the world for making our number for the year, then the learning experience was more valuable than the contract value that we might bring in. But that requires the long-term vision that I think, like I try very hard now to help leaders empower their new managers to get to that place faster without having to go through all the mess ups early on in their career.
I mean, I feel like that's giving me anxiety just listening.
Yeah.
Because
Which
I
part?
feel like so
Which
many.
part?
I mean, I think
The letting go part.
the letting go part.
Letting go. Yeah. No, totally.
Says my husband. But I feel like so many leaders wouldn't do that because at the end of the day, they feel responsible for, like, it's their name on the line. They're responsible ultimately for the end results.
Also, you're responsible for like your team learning, growing, and developing.
Absolutely. However, I feel like that goes by the wayside most often. And I want to talk to you about this. I want to ask you about this, Casey, but I feel you've talked about this. Leaders get into these opportunities, into these roles with no training.
Oh, yeah.
And so then leaders are left to their own devices of like, well, it's not necessarily my job to like make my team the best they can be. It's my job to hit results. And sometimes those two things aren't happening at the same time.
They become worlds apart.
Right.
I think one thing I loved about Salesforce is I think they, as a company, for the most part, within the organizations in the business that I worked in, they widened the aperture on what are the definitions for success on a sales team. Yes, results is absolutely there. But other things that go into that for measurements for success as a leader are one of the top things that I'm really proud of as a leader when I was there was how many people did I promote during my time when I was a leader.
Do you remember the number?
God, no. But if I looked up one of my slide decks from when I was trying to get promoted, I did, because that was something I would look at and I'd be like, by the way, look at how many people, not only did I promote, but how many people did I promote into roles of leadership at the company? Ultimately, a CEO, when they're trying to grow a business, short-term and long-term, they want to both see short-term results, but they also want to see consistency. So I would look at, are you having these crazy high years and then low years, or do we have consistency over time? And then also, how much are we developing our people for a pipeline of new leaders over time? So I agree with you, Sam, that there is an element of cultural norm, particularly in certain industries, that is over-indexing on results only. And it is feeding into some bad behaviors that new managers will pick up on, right? People will focus on what you reward, whether it's through their compensation or through what you promote, what behaviors you promote and celebrate. And that's the message from the top down, right?
I want to dive into that a little bit more because, we talk to leaders all the time, and I do find it so fascinating. We just had an executive from Boeing come speak to our community, and he was talking about, he spent 36 years in leadership at, high executive levels within Boeing. And his leadership journey looked like on a Friday afternoon, he went to his manager's office. The manager said, I think you should be a people leader. Let me know on Monday if you're interested. Monday he came in and they were like, yeah, this sounds great. What do I do now? And the response was, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, you got
That's
this.
right. Yeah, that's right. That's very typical.
And so it's so typical. I think we've all been in that position. Mm-hmm. Like we've both been leaders, but nobody like, here's the handbook, here's, so leaders are very much left to their own devices to either like have an example that they're looking after or do a bunch of research on their own. But it does become a very individual journey of like, what does leadership look like? So first question, why do you think that is? Like, why is it such an overlooked role? And given how much impact it really can have on organizations and culture and everything that comes along with that.
Yeah, gosh, it's such a good question, Sam. And it's a lot of why I do what I do. There's a metric that was put out there by, I believe it was McKinsey, that said that frontline managers are leading between 60 and 75% of your workforce. And yet they receive
They'll figure it out.
They receive the least, yeah. But they receive the least amount of training and development dollars from a company. The bulk of training and development dollars go to more senior roles of leadership, right? I don't know quite what the answer is. I think there is certainly an element of the business is moving really fast and we can't slow down for these people to learn. They need to just figure out how to dive in quickly. And a lot of that will be why people got promoted into the role, was their ability to think on their feet and act quickly. I think another element of it could potentially be that some of those senior executives had to figure it out on their own. And therefore they think that other people should have to figure it out on their own as well.
Or they're told to go read a leadership book.
Right. Like go figure it out. But I think the other thing that'll oftentimes happen is because those first line managers do have so much on their plate, I think they themselves, think about yourselves when you were first promoted to being a manager. When you had enablement thrown on your calendar, what was your first reaction?
Well, I'm the classic leader. Like I never had enablement thrown on my calendar. Like, hey, you're leading this team now. You got 5 people. Good luck.
Yeah.
Honestly, same. Yeah.
I had companies where no enablement was put on my calendar, or there was, and I would usually eye roll and decline because I don't have time
for this.
Right.
I don't have time. I'm trying to deal with a burning building 24/7. I don't have time for this. And a lot of times there is this element of those individual leaders themselves needing to feel like they have the space and the capacity to even invest in it in themselves. And part of that changes by the people who are delivering the training being people that those leaders respect. In my experience, when those enablements were provided, they were oftentimes being delivered by either third-party companies that have no idea about a day in my life,
Right.
in my work life, right? Or they're being delivered by someone that feels so disconnected from my world that, again, they have no idea what I'm going through. Hence, going back to, I don't have time for this. I have deals to close.
How do you think enablement could better teach you the lessons or the gift of empowerment? So I feel like most leaders miss out on the fact of like how to empower their people, right? I think somewhere you mentioned about like leading through your people instead of around them. I think when you really empower people, you're able to lead through them, if that's the way I'm taking it from your context. But I'd love to hear more about that phrasing.
Yeah, going back to things like influential communication, letting go of control and delegation. And I have a thought on that too, Sam, by the way, when you said that gave you anxiety, because it did for me for a long time too. A lot of it is, as an enablement partner within a company, find the leaders in your organization or outside that are already modeling that really well and ask for them to be the ones delivering it. Because a lot of it comes down to who is delivering the content. If it's coming directly from me, the enablement partner, it's probably not going to be listened to in the same way as an SVP would, who's walked in their shoes. So I think a lot of it will come down to who is delivering it. Now, if you don't have someone in your organization that you see modeling that behavior really well, you can either look at empowering the people higher up or look for people outside of your organization that the people within it will respect in that same way. But on the topic of control and letting go of control, and I have a number to deliver on and it's on my shoulders, I do think this is particularly hard. No offense, Jason, but it's exceptionally hard for women, especially mothers deal with this a lot at home too. We feel a lot of personal responsibility to be the ones carrying the household with our kids. And I actually feel like COVID and COVID parenting was the biggest lesson for me in letting go of control and realizing in my home which are glass balls and which are rubber balls. If my husband is cooking dinner and there's no greens on the plate, we're going to be fine. Like the kids will be okay. Rubber ball that's going to bounce, right?
Yeah.
The number one question I had a senior leader at Salesforce say to me once was, you need to ask the question every time you're looking at a task on your calendar or a meeting on your calendar, am I uniquely qualified to be the one on this call? What are my unique qualifications for this? And I asked the same thing at home too. Am I uniquely qualified as the mom to do this thing when it comes to the kids? Or could that be delegated to someone else that's equally qualified? They might do it different,
but it will still get done.
It'll still get done, even if it's messy.
Uniquely qualified. Yeah.
I heard it put yesterday, a little more simpler terms, that if it's not if it's not a fuck yes, then it's a no. But if it's not a resounding yes that you have to do it, then it's an absolute no. And I was like, that's a little more simpler terms.
This just became a capital E episode.
It was in quotes. It was
okay. So
it was Mark Manson. So like his book is titled,
that is in the title of his book for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. So Casey, you've gone through many leadership roles yourself, and now you're doing very tangential but different work. Can you talk about the work you're doing now?
Of course. Here's the thing about that I think you'll both appreciate about entrepreneurship is it can evolve over time, what you're doing.
That is very true.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, when I started this business, C2it Partners, I intentionally called it that so it could be a little open-ended and free form with what I wanted to do. Initially, it started out as a lot of consulting and coaching for executives in small business on how to streamline revenue and people operations. I've kind of moved away from that more. I then was more in the world of coaching for leaders and for new leaders within companies. And that has now evolved into more facilitation and training. But the key theme on all of this has been focusing on the soft skills of leadership. So most companies, if they're providing anything in the way of training or facilitation, it's going to be more of the quote unquote hard skills. If we're talking about the world of sales where I came from, you're most likely, if you're going to get any enablement, it's going to be on things like how to forecast accurately, how to operationally run your book of business, maybe how to use data to make good decisions when it comes to where your team should focus on next for sales plays and things of that nature. And maybe you have some training on one-on-ones or hard conversations, giving feedback. And then you're probably thrown into the fire at some point if someone has to be out of the business, then you're thrown into the fire on how to have that conversation and how to document. It's very rare that you're having any real training or enablement on things like we talked about, how to lead through your team, how to delegate effectively and let go of control, because you're going to burn out, how to manage your own stress and self-management and self-regulation, things like how to handle boundaries in relationships when you all of a sudden are thrown into managing your former friends and now you're the boss. So that's really the key themes that I have been focused on. And in 2026, it's really focused around working with business owners and organizations on speaking and workshops on those topics.
So I feel like soft skills have been thrown by the wayside for years.
Yeah.
And some people are lucky enough to just innately have them. How is this landing in your sales cycle? Like, are people all about this? Do they want to know the exact ROI associated with it? Like, what does that look like?
Oh, yeah. I've been doing a lot of work on my ICP lately, my ideal client profile, right? It's landing very interestingly, depending on the topic within emotional intelligence. The topic of burnout is a really interesting one. I've learned that it's a topic that everyone feels, but few want to actually acknowledge and do something about.
I feel like a lot of or people are afraid of it too, of like getting to that
it's a
point.
scary thing. It's very taboo.
And I feel like it's also, you be curious to hear what you're hearing about it, but it's kind of taboo to talk about it in the workplace.
Talk about it. If I'm a leader and I'm acknowledging it with my team, am I somehow saying there's something wrong with us and there's something wrong with our culture, rather than thinking of it as a preventative type of measure to talk about? But it feels really vulnerable, right? Now, when it comes to things like communication effectiveness, communicating with influence, being able to have effective conversations to gain buy-in for things like change management, that side of emotional intelligence is really, really landing with a lot of clients, as is topics like self-regulation. Emotional regulation for new managers is a big one that I'm having a lot of people bring me in on. So it's interesting. Some of it people love, others people are kind of like, that's a little too personal. That's too personal. We can't go there.
We interrupt this episode with some breaking news.
Big breaking news?
Big breaking news.
Love me some BBN.
For the third time, we are hosting the
Arcadia Leadership Experience,
July 27th through 30th in the woods of Montana.
Yeah, new location this year, deeper in the mountains, which is going to be fun-er. It's got some great spectacular views of the Bridger Mountains.
Sure does.
We've been out there to see it a couple times.
On property.
Also, there's yaks.
Yeah, kitty yaks.
Yaks on property. But anyway, what is this Arcadia Leadership Experience known as ALX?
ALX is an anti-conference.
Like a conference, but not a conference.
Correct. Hence the anti. For 65 of the top go-to-market GTM leaders in the space, coming together to learn from each other, build intentional relationships, have really unique experiences together, like fly fishing, yoga,
hiking,
sound bath.
But it's also great because like we're helping people discover purpose and refresh. Like, there's a lot of psychology of like being in the woods for 2 hours kind of resets your brain. Like imagine what 3 days in the woods can do for you. And you're in the woods because like everyone's sleeping in glamping tents, with the exception of like 8 people who get it indoor lodging this year.
So if that's your jam, sign up now because those will go fast.
They're almost gone.
They are almost gone. But anyways, we'd love to see you there. Arcadia Leadership Experience for more information.
And big thanks to PartnerStack, who's helping us pull this off yet again this year.
Yep, couldn't do without them. So we'll see you this summer in Montana.
ALX 26, y'all. Peace. You've mentioned the topic of self-regulation a few times. Like, I love to hear kind of how you define that and kind of how you're helping leaders more address that and like be more comfortable like in that self-regulation and actualization.
Yeah, I think everybody assumes that leadership and empathy in leadership and EQ in leadership is all about the other people and the other person. But there's a very real thing called emotional contagion in psychology, and it has both mental and physical effects on yourself and the people that you're around. There's been research studies on if you yourself as a leader have an elevated heart rate and you're stressed, it literally adjusts the heart rate of everyone else in the room. So it's like this looming undercurrent that everybody forgets, right? Is how to, and there's this umbrella of self-regulation and self-management that's both emotional regulation as well as self-awareness. When it comes to emotional regulation, it's actively teaching yourself not to be reactive in the moment, which takes conscious effort. Makes me think about like, I hate to go back to parenting, but seriously, parenting has been my best teacher in leadership. Like Dr. Becky needs to create a leadership course. I swear to God, you know.
Actually, she's a solid follow on LinkedIn.
Yes.
For that reason.
Good inside, everybody. Like, it's so good. But like in that moment, being able to pause yourself and take a breath and bring your own temperature down, because there's so often when you're a leader that you're going and you exasperate and express stress, and that just rubs off on everyone on your team. I used to do this all the time. I was never great at it, but I'm trying to be better, you know, and I really made a conscious effort about it. So that's one piece. The other piece is about self-awareness. I find that leaders that I coach fall into one of two buckets. They're either overconfident, they think that everything is great on their team and that they're doing a really good job, but they don't understand why nobody else on the team can keep up with what they're trying to ask of them. Like, why can nobody else? What the heck, right? Or the other bucket is they think they're doing a terrible job all the time. I always fell into this bucket. They always think they're doing a terrible job and they're never doing enough. And somebody's going to find out that I just landed into this job because I got lucky. And that's the imposter syndrome time.
Yeah, I was going to say imposter syndrome, loud and lights there.
Loud and clear, right? But both of them come from this undercurrent of a distorted view of yourself. That's where both of them come from. And that's the piece of EQ, quote unquote EQ, which is so hot right now. Everybody's talking about EQ. But that's the piece that I feel like nobody's actually really addressing.
This is the first time I've heard this flipped from like an external, my EQ, to internal. And I think that that's a really, I mean, I'm kind of stuck in that thought right now of I've never thought about it.
I mean, if you think about it in the context of kids yet again, it's like how our stress levels are like around the house, around our kids.
Very
like
much
they're going
so.
to match that. Like they're going to find that and grasp onto that. And I don't think it's any different people that we lead. And I think it's super important for leaders to understand that and be aware of that. And I think most companies, especially in this like this tech world, are not talking about that.
No.
Everybody's talking about empathy and leadership. Everybody's talking about compassionate leadership. And maybe they'll dip their toe into self-confidence a little bit, right? Particularly in spaces of women in roles of leadership, I think talk a lot about confidence. But this self piece, actually the founder of this whole idea of emotional intelligence, he said that self-awareness and self-management and self-regulation was a huge part of it. But in the corporate world, it seems to be ignored right now, which is really interesting.
So I think this is so interesting because what we talk to with our community and with people in Arcadia literally means harmony. And that's part of it. It's like you can't be good externally as a leader unless you're paying attention internally. And we talk about that more holistically of like, you got to pay attention to your health, your relationships, you know, all assets of your life in order to show up and be the best version of yourself for your team. I love this because it's a pretty scientific approach to this. Talk to us, like, are there any concrete practices or rituals that you help leaders walk through to keep this top of mind for them?
There's a few. Some of them are going to come across as being very fluffy and trite, or like I've heard this or basic, overly basic.
I think the best results come from simple things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Things like getting outside and taking a walk multiple times a day. And by the way, without a device, right? So, but there's like sneaky things like, and I used to succumb to some of this too. Like sometimes I'm like, well, I got outside today a couple times. I took 3 one-on-ones outside. That's great. You were walking while you had a one-on-one. That's fantastic. But you still had work on the brain. It's about vitamin D. It's about unplugging your mind and your body from work at some point during the day. And I do think there is something to be said for that movement to be outdoors instead of indoors. I think that's regardless of the weather. My brother-in-law is Norwegian, and he has a phrase that is, there is no bad weather, there's only bad clothes. And I know you two are in Montana, so you can appreciate that too.
Yeah.
I'm in Southern California, so I have no excuse. I need to always be outside.
Not at all. Yeah. I mean, it's just like what we do our event outside, and I think the psychology manager is 2 hours in nature can completely rewire your brain. So just being outside anytime is going to help contribute and lead to that. And going back to how we kick things off, it's like stress plus rest equals recovery. And if you're not taking breaks from that chronic stress and being on, you're just going to continue to absorb as much of the stress, and your cortisol levels are just going to be at a constant spike 100% of the time. They won't be able to regulate the body.
Okay, but I want to ask you about this, Casey, because I saw you just post about this, but I think the current nomenclature, the current definition of rest is not rest. So talk about that. How do you feel about that?
Oh, it's so hard for me. I'm a type A achiever. Okay. Like,
I mean, same. I'm asking for a friend.
I am not that friend for the record.
Trying very hard to be better about true rest. I am discovering more and more that I am disconnected from this world, what true rest looks like for me. And it is through finding something that is for the pure joy of it and not for the productivity of it. For me, yesterday, my restful event was my mom had some really pretty flowers outside in her backyard, and I just asked her if I could pick them and take them home. And I made a couple of pretty arrangements for my house. That was some restful time.
And then you sold
for
them, right?
Did not sell them.
Started an Etsy shop. I built it through Lovable.
Not rest. But that's where my brain always goes, Sam. I am totally that person.
That because
I'm so that person. You have to like actually consciously force yourself to not go there.
I mentioned you call it a restful event.
That's right.
Yeah.
Like an event, not so much like just resting. Like you've got to kind of train and wire your brain to think about it in the context of like a block of time or an event that I have to do and in order to make the body rest. And I think for those that are wired that way, I think that's very important to structure it in such a way.
If you have to make it a task on your to-do list, fine. Make it a task on your to-do list.
I think Cal Newport actually talks a lot about that, like schedule time for breaks.
That's right. I've actually discovered myself, I recently came off of, I'm very fortunate that I have family that lives overseas, which is a very fun problem to have. So we went and spent Christmas in Norway with my brother and sister-in-law who live in Oslo. And my husband and I intentionally, for those 2 weeks, we were not working during that time. And my brother and sister-in-law are very good about really not being connected to their devices all the time. So they were helping us to also unplug. And what was interesting is I am someone that still to this day frequently struggles with tension headaches, cluster headaches, migraine, and I will get them a few times a month. But during those 2 weeks that I was there, I had not a single headache. And I was outside every day, in the cold, by the way, but we were outside every day because you have less bright light in the winter. You know, the sun is up. Sunrise is around 9:30 in the morning. Sunset is around 3 in the afternoon. So the culture is you maximize that small window of time to be outdoors. And we did that every day. I was not on this stupid thing, hardly ever. I also, and so I've been thinking a lot about what are some of those practices that I can bring back to my life now. And one of the things is, like you said, Jason, I literally am scheduling breaks into my calendar that when I'm sitting at a computer, at a desk, at a screen, I have an alert every 2 hours that says, get up and go outside. and I take a proper 1 hour lunch break. I
What?
know that's not feasible. I know that's not feasible for a lot of people in tech, right? It feels impossible to do that, even if it's 30 minutes. You were asking about other tips and tricks that I'll tell people. Mel Robbins talks about, she had some psychology person on that talked about the value of putting your phone in grayscale.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I got a few friends that
Wow.
do that.
Have you guys ever done that?
I did it once upon a time. I think this is before we met. Like Matt, my buddy Matt used to do that for that very purpose.
The only thing that's annoying about it is our phones are also our cameras now. And I like to take pictures and do stuff like that with my kids. So my son actually taught me how to make it so that the button that normally puts it on silent actually makes it grayscale back and forth. And
Wow.
I turn that on.
Teach me that.
I know. We
He's
might need to
10.
have him on to do a tutorial.
He's 10. Okay. He's literally 10. Something with your settings. We'll put it in the show notes. Do you guys have show notes? Is that a thing?
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
We'll reference your 10-year-old son.
Yeah.
But he showed me how to do that. And I consciously put that on as of like, I keep it on that most of the time. And I don't
gonna have to try this now.
I don't want to be on my phone as much.
No. I mean, if you're listening and you want to be on your phone as much, like let us know. Because I think that nobody does.
No.
We just are.
We just are.
Yeah.
If you're of working age, I mean, if you're like 16 listening to this podcast and you always want to be on your phone.
Well, if you're 16 and you're listening to this podcast, I still want to hear from you.
It just becomes like I'm only on my phone to do that one task.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's less of the like scrolling across apps. I don't get sucked into doom scrolling as much. But that's another kind of like hack that I've really embraced. And I for sure have it on grayscale as of like 4 p.m. every day. And it does not go back onto color because that's about turning your brain off so that you can actually go to sleep at night.
I kind of wish I could switch back and forth on phones. Like I could transfer, like get my phone to work on a flip phone, use a flip phone for the weekends and like iPhone for work.
Yeah, but like the reality is nobody calls you on the weekends. No.
Yeah, but like a friend likes like pick up your phone more on the weekends, which you don't really need to. Nobody
calls you on the weekends. Gosh, tell me in your midlife without telling me you're in your midlife. Nobody calls me on the weekends.
Nobody calls me.
We're all
period.
together. Yeah, true. Nobody calls you period.
Except for my mom.
Okay, so let's like just playing devil's advocate here. Somebody's listening to this and they're like, yeah, okay, this sounds great, but like impossible for my life. Like I am leading a team. I'm a leader in a tech company. This is the way it has to be. What do you say to them?
I say that the worst that could happen if they give it a try is that they question what they're doing and your life. Sorry, this is extreme, but your life is really important. Your life is more important than your job. Your life is more important than your professional identity. It's more than your job, right? A lot of us have wrapped into our jobs our professional identity. At least giving it a try. I would question if they've actually given it a try to see what happens. But when you do try and it doesn't work, if you have truly tried and it's not working, then it's time to question, is this the time for a change? And that's what ended up happening for me. I was valuing other things more than that job that I had, than that title that I had.
How often do you see that happen in others?
You know, here's the crazy thing is, I think a lot of times people have some sort of an event in their life that has them questioning why they've been doing this. That's usually what forces them into that realization of my life is more important than all of this. And it will be something that usually happens around all of our age. I think we're all in a similar phase of life. It could be becoming a parent. It could be a major recession that puts you into a position of doing things in the business that maybe you personally don't align with. It could be a strong values shift. You know, I mean, you two both were ex-corporate as well, starting Arcadia. I'm curious to know, what were those moments for you that made you decide things weren't working anymore? Something, it's either going to work and try to make things work within this realm and be the change, or it's not working and I've tried and I need to go be the change somewhere else, right?
I've talked about this a lot on the show, and you and I, Casey, have talked about this, but that identity shift was a huge thing that I didn't anticipate. So that was kind of shocking. The other thing that I want to just like, and I'm not ignoring your question, we can come back to it, but I want to stop here for a second and just acknowledge, because I feel like A lot of people dismiss conversations like this because it feels very privileged to be able to have them.
100%.
But I also feel like there is still a choice in that. It's not all or nothing, at least from my perspective. I want to hear your perspective on that.
I actually really appreciate you saying that, because I always try to say, like, I know that I'm coming from a place of tremendous privilege. You know, a lot of people feel like I can't just quit my job. It is still a choice. Everything in our life is ultimately a choice. And there are people throughout the history of time that have found ways to pave their own way. Everything is trade-offs. And financially, this has been a really hard decision for me. I think that's an important thing to acknowledge. It's not easy leaving the comforts and the security of a corporate job. It's a major shift. And we are now in the position where we are a dual entrepreneur household, similar to where you guys are at. Our household is in the same. And there are a lot of hardships that go along with that. There is a tremendous amount of privilege in feeling that you can do that you can make that happen. But the other side to that coin is there are a lot of people in far less privileged circumstances than I am that are making these same choices that I am making. I hope that comes across.
Yeah. And I think that, it's easy to listen to these conversations and be like, well, the only way forward is to quit my job. And
it doesn't have
I don't
to
know
be.
I don't know that that's true. Like, I think it's the way that we can show up for ourselves and kind of make that space for simple things. Like you're saying, like, go for a walk. Try to carve out that space so that your job doesn't become the only thing that you have and you do. Like, reclaim that identity outside of it. Find the space to get a breath of fresh air. Stop looking at your phone. Like, these kinds of things really do make a difference, as simple as they are.
100%.
And I would also say, I would challenge, like, if you've actually tried doing some of those things. And the other level is, what are you doing that is fulfilling your identity outside of your work? If you love pickleball, are you playing pickleball? Do you ever play pickleball? And you might say, yeah, I do with coworkers, or I know a lot of people like to golf and they'll golf with coworkers, but that's still a work identity, right? Like, what do you have? That was a big shift for me when I left the corporate world, was the identity outside of work and finding friendships and relationships and interests outside of things that were even remotely connected to my workplace. I think that's a huge piece of it. There's also a lot to be said for what you said, Sam. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It is very realistic, too, that maybe the answer is actually downshifting. Before I left corporate, I was actually pursuing the possibility of switching roles completely and just downshifting and taking a parallel sidestep downward.
Like, just looking to take on less responsibility then.
Yeah. Less responsibility, which also meant less pay, but that also requires some inner work on your professional identity to get over your ego, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But that's also an answer that shouldn't be ignored.
I think the ego part is really interesting, because I think that we can all get into these roles and we get comfortable with the title, the salary, the stress. It all just becomes like the familiar way we look at the world. And it's hard to take a perspective shift and say, like, I will be okay with maybe less, maybe different, maybe new. Even that, just the unknown of all of that is scary for people, but there are other options. You will be okay.
Yeah. The other thing I was reading in that book I was talking about this morning is that, like, it talks about kind of what you're saying here, Casey. It's like, if you're going to endure some stress, find things that are meaningful and that matter to you. And it's like, that's one way that you're just going to be able to overcome like stressful situations, scenarios. Like, most people, I would say, if we use the word like lack purpose around what they're doing, and how do you overcome that? Like, find something that's meaningful to you, find something that matters to you, and like give yourself to that as much as you can, whether it's, your restful event, doing something. For me, like, I know movement matters, and like that changes my whole psyche with my movement practice, whether it's running, working out, or doing something. Like, I have to do it. It matters. It's meaningful to me. And there's other things, right? So find those things that are meaningful and that matter to you. And I think that will begin to change the whole scenario and outlook of your days.
I think the key and the linchpin to that is finding your purpose and your identity in some of those things. Because what's really hard, if you realize, like, this is not sustainable for me, I need to maybe make a shift, is the very real feelings of failure that you are going to feel if you have hung your hat and your identity on that role that you've always sought for and fought to achieve. I certainly dealt with that.
I say, yep, I've been there.
Felt like a total failure. Everyone's going to think I'm a sellout, or I couldn't hack it, or I wasn't strong enough. And a lot of that was because my view of success as a whole person was over-indexed based on my title and my performance and my paycheck.
Yeah. Okay, so to close this out, what do you want listeners, leaders to walk away from this conversation with? Like, is there a single thesis or statement that you think is really something people should carry forward?
It's all going to be okay with or without you in it. The business,
that hurts.
Your team.
None of this needs you.
It's the truth.
It is truth. Yeah.
Everyone's going to be okay with or without you in it. And if you have to step away and you feel like it's impossible, I would challenge you to ask yourself, have I actually ever put that to the test to see what happens? Does that sting too much? Is that too much?
No. No. It's funny because every time we have a conversation on this podcast, we get off and I look at Jason and I was like, well, that was a therapy session for me.
Yeah.
Casey, this has been awesome. I mean, I think you're doing really important work in the world, and speaking out about your experience, is super brave and vulnerable, but it opens up the door for people to take pause and inventory and, look at their lives. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. I hope it helps somebody.
Totally.
Absolutely.
If somebody wants to know more or even work with you, what does that look like? How do they find you?
Yeah. Easiest way would either be through LinkedIn to find me. Casey Calkins is where you can find me, or you can look at my website, C2itPartners.com. It's the letter C, the number 2, itpartners.com.
I was hoping that's how it went, hence the CC, Casey Calkins.
That's exactly, you got it. That's why.
I just discovered this C squared.
It's an alliteration and a play on words. It also is from a really interesting quote from author Octavia Butler. When she decided she wanted to be an author, she was a young child, and she wrote in her journal, "So be it, see to it."
I love that. So much.
Be it, see to it.
That's right.
That's so great.
Yeah.
I will say from experience, she's a solid LinkedIn follow. Every time I read one of your posts, I feel grateful for it. So, Casey, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Truly, this is a great convo.
Agreed. All right, friends, go be great in the world. Go take care of yourselves.
Yeah.
Get off your freaking phone. If you're walking and listening to us, we appreciate you, but stop.
Ask your 10-year-old how to put your phone in grayscale.
Exactly. They'll tell you, apparently.
All right, friends. All right. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much.